What is going on, guys? Grave here today. Let's talk about changes to beam abilities. And this was something that was in this week's public test server. Of course, this was week 4 of the public test server for update 46. And when I read over this to begin with, I really just kind of read over it and didn't think anything about it. But the more I kind of thought about it, the more interesting it kind of became. So let's go ahead and talk about these changes. Abilities that are traditionally referred to as beams have all been updated to now be considered direct damage rather than damage over time. This effect, of course, will affect the following abilities: Radiant Destruction and its morphs, Fate Carver and its morphs, Soul Strike and its morphs, and Vampiric Drain and its morphs. Now, when you first hear that, I know a lot of people out there may already thought that beams of any type were probably already direct damage. That is kind of an odd thing with ESO. There's some abilities that you would think would be a dot that are not, some that you would think would be a direct damage, and they're actually dots. It's kind of strange on some fronts there. I do see why they were making these changes with subclassing. That's definitely what has caused this and the reasoning for this. But at the same time, it's not a change that I feel like strongly about, like I really hate it or really like it or have a whole lot of feelings about. That's probably why when I first read it, I kind of just read over it and didn't really consider much kind of there. But the more I got to thinking about it, the more I got to thinking about interesting builds you could make with direct damage sets. Even for 1-bar players, you could have 2 direct damage sets with an Oaken Soul Ring and see a lot of damage here. You could make maybe a heavy attack 2-bar build and see a lot of damage here. You could make really kind of anything you wanted as long as you were placing all of your damage from your sets and your skills there with subclassing into direct damage. There's a lot of different things that kind of would work with this, and especially out of what we have with the Templar and of course the Arcanist class. But it is kind of interesting to me the way they decided to do this, just for the fact that it will affect some sets in game. And of course, all updates in ESO affect sets. But a lot of times it's the set gets directly nerfed or the set gets directly buffed. And I really wish with all the sets, and of course I talk about this all the time on the channel, all the sets in game would get some changes to them so they're all more useful and all, something that people want to try out, and not just, oh, well, this set comes from this overland set, this set comes from this dungeon. They're not really worth anything. I just break them down. I would like to see sets tailored more towards maybe affecting what they say on the tooltip of damage over time or direct damage, but actually have some buffs to these. Well, there's a lot of different sets in game that you could put together for different types of builds. And like I said, once I just started thinking about all the different stuff you could do with damage over time sets compared to direct damage sets, it's kind of what made me start thinking more about this change. And I was like, well, this is actually a little more to this. And even when it comes to CP, there'll be a lot of CP changes there you could do to make a direct damage class with 2 direct damage sets with some more CP tailored towards dealing that direct damage. And I think this could be kind of interesting. At the same time, I do feel like with subclassing and all the changes we've had so far in the public test server, that a lot of the true in-game players, now if you're out there, you're score pushing, you're looking for that max damage, that mid-max character, a lot of these skills and subclassing, a lot of the gear you're going to be wearing is pretty much all going to be the same in the end. And that's one thing I don't like to see. For everyone else, and I know that player base, the everyone else player base, is a lot of the overall players in ESO. Your solo players, you're just people that go out and do quests and maybe only play normal dungeons and a few bet here and there. Things like this really aren't going to affect you that much because you can still play around and mess around with a lot of different sets and a lot of different things within subclassing and make a really good class that works for what you're doing. But when it comes to true in-game players, and I know there's that crowd has definitely shrunk down over the years, it's going to make a lot of things the exact same, and that's one thing I hate to see, is that everybody's going to have that exact same build because of these changes. But overall, I just thought this was an interesting change that I kind of just skipped over when I was reading. I was reading it and didn't really realize, hey, there's some really cool things you could do with this. And like I said, you could really make a great build if you're a fan of 1-bars out there with an Oaken Soul and 2 direct damage sets. And some of these direct damage sets we have in game, you can get from vendors, you can get from overland content, you can even craft. So I think this is going to be kind of interesting. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think about the changes to these traditional beam abilities going from damage over time to direct damage, whether you like it or not, or if you really are kind of like I was and really didn't have a feeling either way about it. But I still think it's pretty interesting And like I said, I would like to see Zeiss start updating all of these older sets and tailoring them towards what they're supposed to be. Damage over time, dots, whatever. And that way you can start mixing and matching more stuff and start using different sets available to us, because we have so many good ones out there that really are just not useful as of right now. Like I said, guys, leave me a comment with your thoughts. And of course, if you liked it, hit the like. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so. And I'll catch you next time. Peace.